Here at BDC HQ today with Carl Farrar, Mr. Dango, pro driver.
Hi everyone.
He's stopped by and also brought the lovely Ranger over here, which has just got back from having wrapped with
Craig Weston, Violent D, the G2E motorsport truck.
Very nice. So we've stopped by today just to have a little bit of a conversation and a chat about drifting, obviously, but specifically about kind of the costs of drifting and how much power you need to be competitive and some other things for people who are either involved in the sport at a low level or are looking to get into the sport. This is something maybe they can refer to.
There's been a lot of posts about, you know, how much power do I need to be competitive, and I think we've sort of lost our way really with this, because not that I'm the best driver in the world or the most talented or get the best results, but I've been around for a very long time and I've seen the transition of the sport to where we are with the top flight guys, and I feel that people are just spending money that they don't need to, and more the fact that they're just having a miserable time for spending the money. They're not having a better day. I don't know, I mean, Max obviously, BDC owner, has seen where we are now with tyres and cars. But the thing is that you see people like David Goldstraw, Max Fleckley, Alistair Sutton we were talking about earlier. These are really talented drivers, and when they had less power and less grippy tyres, their qualifying lines were unbelievable, and if they did have a bit more spoke, a bit more impact, they'd have been akin to Dwayne McKeever or Martin Richards or any of the top drivers. The problem is that then when you go from that to trying to have another 300-400 horsepower, the grippiest tyres ever, the cars are just really hard to drive, which makes you a bit miserable. Plus the fact the tyres don't last very long, so you're changing them every couple of laps anyway, so you're getting less seat time, and you've got to do a better job in a car that is essentially more difficult to drive. Whereas I feel that, you know, I'd rather qualify at all. Sometimes I don't, which is frankly shocking. But, you know, if you qualify well on a car that is slower, with less grip, on the cheaper tyres, and you're in the top 8, you're not going to get mullered by, I keep saying it because he just comes and wins and it's mildly annoying, we should sink the ferry, Dwayne McKeever. But, you know, it is that, you know, if you qualify 32nd in your 1,000 horsepower S15 with a 2J or an LSR, because that's what the internet tells you that you need to have, and then you get Dwayne and you get battered straight away, you've had very little seat time in practice because your tyres only last 2 laps. You've had very little fun for cash because it's cost you an absolute fortune, even if you can afford it. The car probably runs hot because it's got all the power in the world and you're running flat out in practice trying to get the line right. The car's super difficult to drive, it's trying to grip up all the time, so you're struggling to meet clips. I mean, for me, and I've been doing it for a while, in some of the cars fully gripped up, I'm like, did you get the clips? I don't know, it was over in like 12 seconds. Title for me, sex tape, but it's, you know, it's just difficult to have a good time when you're going that fast, and people will disagree and say speed, 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 power, power, power. But when you're starting out, and that's kind of where we're basing it, because the people asking the questions of, you know, what power do I need to be competitive, they don't know. And the top flight guy saying, well, you need 700 horsepower. No, you need seat time in your vehicle. And the cheapest way you can have that is the best thing.
So if you break it down to the essence of it, for someone who's a new driver, who's just starting out, you know, maybe they've got an MX-5 or an E36 or maybe a Silvia or whatever that is, IS200, a generally stock sort of car, they're starting off, say they've got a bit of suspension, welder, some stuff like that. What would you recommend that they go for in terms of setting up that car and in terms of what they should be spending their money on?
I mean, you know, cars have all got very expensive now, so if you've got a Silvia, you need to just put it in one of them cocoon bag things and don't just walk past it occasionally, rub it down with a anti-static cloth. Certainly don't take them drifting, no one can afford that. But it's again back to that cost thing. If you could spend £10,000 on a vehicle, 300 horse, I mean, if you like to be broke down, you could have an SR, but David Goldstraw was a good example, having a 1UZ with 300, Matt Fleckley the same. If you could have 300 horsepower reliable in a vehicle for £10,000 and spend, if your mindset was I'm going to spend 20 or 30 on these big power cars, spend the other 10,000 on seat time. if you live in Scotland, go to Driftland. If you live somewhere near Teesside, go to Teesside. They're all still running days. Birmingham Wheels, while it's still there, you know, great. I think there's a D-pad thing, but it's seat time. It took me forever to learn how to drift, and I had the Laurel from when they came out. It wasn't too expensive then, but it was seat time. I'm not naturally talented. I do a will over skill, and I think very few people are naturally talented. There's people,
Yep.
and I could list them, but you know, if you're not, you need to drive your car, and you need to drive your car as cheap as possible. So spend the money on something reliable that isn't massive power, but you can run a nice consistent line and enjoy yourself, because the people that do best are having a great time. Max Cotton is living his best life. I mean, he's crying to me on the internet that he wants to drive a car on the road because he's never actually done that, but I wish I had such a terrible time such as himself in the PS. He's a lovely lad and naturally talented, never been able to drive on the road, so it's made it easier. But even he had less power than everybody else at certain points, but his line driving was perfect because you saw him at every event. He just drove that car.
Just consistent, very consistent.
If you spend all your money on your car, then you really don't want to drive it because it's really expensive on tyres, and you can't run a 500-600 horsepower car on budgets. Or even if you really want to have a cheap time, befriend your local ATS or Quick Fit, have all the part warns. Yeah, you'll be changing tyres a bit, but buy wheels instead and just drive the car, and you will be a great line driver, and you will qualify high because you will not get nailed for smoke and impact as much as you think, and that will put you in the right side of the bracket to be against people who've not actually done that well and make it their problem to drive slow in the cars that they bought that they can't actually drive. And everybody, if you want to set your car up to be as fast as Luke Barker, which is like some kind of jump jet, I think he could probably get wheelies at Santa Pod in it. It is so fast. But even, you know, talented driver, he really struggled. They got so much grip in it and he couldn't drive it. But if you're trying to, and I think that's what everybody's doing, and I think this is the main problem. Everybody's trying to set the car up or buy a car or own a car to beat that one person.
Yeah.
I want to be as fast as Martin Richards, Ray McKeever, Ollie Evans, if he comes drifting. And, you know, these cars are super speedy. But in reality, you're probably only going to get them once. So how about make your car so you can get top 32, top 16, top 8. Then if you get absolutely furloughed by somebody like that, you've had a good day. You've not spent all the money on tyres, you've not spent all the money on cars, power upgrade, took loans out you can't afford. You've ruined drifting before you've started. It should be fun. And I think people need to sort of get back on board with that rather than just be brainwashed into thinking they need all of this grip. Your round cost is probably on semi-reasonable tyres is $2,000 to $2,500. If you do a practice day and you're a bit demented like Hayden, you've got lots of power, you could spend up to £4,000 to £5,000 per round. That said, I'm imagining that if you were doing, and I keep going back to it and I apologise because it sounds like I'm championing a particular driver, but I'm not. But if you were David Goldstraw, that vehicle is probably a £10,000 to £15,000 vehicle, and he could probably spend £1,500 to £2,000, and he would probably still come certainly maybe top 8 because he's really good. Yeah, he's going to get driven away to on Luna, but I don't think he's going to get judged too harshly for that. I think there are your figures, and I think your car cost, I think you could still do it for 20,000, although people are doing it for 80. I think, you know, something with reliable 400-500, probably maybe 500 now, but one UZ with a turbo on it, it's a cheap enough engine, you know, you run a BMW gearbox conversion, you ideally want to buy something that somebody's made the mistakes with before. People are getting a bit silly with costs on cars now, but they're not necessarily worth that. Your JZs are getting harder to get now, but you could probably still get something JZ powered, you know, at your £20,000. Bear in mind, people are spending 10 to 15 on gearboxes. Just change gear less. Again, you may get battered by somebody with a sequential in a certain battle, but generally that few milliseconds. I mean, I drove a sequential for the first time this year. It's ruined my life. I don't recommend it to everyone. Save your money. It's brilliant. I absolutely love it. But I'd rather have a whole car. If you can drive your car every single lap the same, and the conditions change, but you know, because you've been on a wet day, But when you're like, I can only afford to do 10 laps in practice because that's my tyres for the weekend. I can only afford so much fuel because I'm running it on race fuel now. We run on pump gas on everything because you can get it in the petrol station. Some people say they struggle to get fuel and that's why they've not done rounds, which seems like an insane thing at our beginner level. You know, just drive your cars, have a good time. The most fun I've ever had is at Drift Matsoris and at Three Sisters demo days and taxi days with Dory, Alex with a chaser. You know, we've had some amazing times. And it didn't, you know, I made money on one of them weekends because I'd got paid to do taxis.
Yeah.
It's at a point that you know you need that power, you'll know you need that power, you'll know you need that grip. But people are trying to set up that way and having expensive crashes in expensive cars, and that's a worry.
So you're saying go out, have fun.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing.
100%.
Enjoy it,
Keep
seat
drifting
time, keep drifting fun. That's been our slogan this year for a bunch of reasons. And mostly because that's what us as the BDC team, me, Chris, Toby, the guys who do it full time, it's our lives. It's really cool. We really love getting to do it, and we have a ton of fun with it, and we want that to be passed on to drivers, crew, media, the fans, everyone.
It shows. You don't want to have a miserable time at drifting, and the problem is that if you're spending £4,000 or £5,000 a round on your £40,000-50,000 800 horsepower car and you don't do well, you're going to be sad.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've gone, and Alistair Sutton, we had a conversation once, and I'm sure it was at maybe Rockingham back in the day, and he's like, oh, I've done like 6 tyres, but I had some part warns, but it's really good on tyres because we've got E36 328, and he qualified like top 5 or something insane. He's living his best life. I was nearly in tears, and I wasn't even running anything expensive. I was like, God, you know, I've probably spent $2,000 and you've spent like 300 and you've had a better time than me.
Yeah. So when we talk about cost, the other side of cost, because for anyone who's spending $4 or $5,000 a round, that's crazy. That's so much money for a year. You're talking $25,000 to do a season.
Of one championship.
Of one championship.
No practice days.
There's 90 championships right now and everything going on. That takes a lot of money away from the rest of your life. Yeah, and then you don't have as much to enjoy. So the other side of the vacuum is kind of sponsorship and that kind of thing. You've obviously teamed up with G2E this year. Really great support, and they've helped you out a lot. Do you have any advice for anyone else looking for sponsors or anything to try to help with budgets?
I mean, advice, I wouldn't say, you know, we ran for 12 years. I could have bought houses, speedboats, anything I wanted really, and instead I went drifting for 12 years. And very fortunate enough to have G2 this year. They've been absolutely amazing. And it's not because, again, I'm the best driver, I'm podiuming it every round. I feel it's because they want to work with me. I try to get on with everybody. I try not to complain and moan about things. I obviously do, I'm English, it's what we do. I do bitch and moan a bit. But I try to do it in a jovial and fun way. And I want to make them have a good time, and I want to give them some value. So I've helped with research and some cool parts we're making for next year. I try to get the staff along to the events, to get them out in the cars. And I try to give something. But I think the sponsors is 2 coins to this. You know, it's great helping a company that's just started and putting a sticker on your car and pushing somebody, even if it's a fabricator or, you know, somebody like you've done with
Vosna UK, Turbo Zentra. We've brought a lot of brands in over the last 2 years.
And you know, anybody like that says, you know, we'll give you something cheaper, stick a sticker on your car, and you want to help them, it's great. But I think the problem with sponsorship is everybody cheapens it. Everybody in the world is sponsored, if you notice, certainly in drifting. Yeah. And they are sponsored because they've been given a sticker or a t-shirt or a cap. And that then makes other people think that they can sponsor drivers for the same. And I think that cheapens the sport. It's a really cool sport. It's a really expensive sport. Yeah. Know if you are worth something, know you're worth, but in the same way, if you're not, work at it and make it so you are. Offer something to people as opposed to, I would just like free things. I don't understand why I've not. Mm-hmm. You know, you see the people that get sponsored properly, their media is really strong, they are constantly promoting a brand, they are promoting themselves. They're doing more than just drifting. They're not just drifting. They're not just at BDC 5 times a year, they're in multiple competitions, at car shows, at venues, at pop-ups, online, streaming. YouTube channels, you know, they give worth, and the worth is not a podium, it's not a championship. That'd be brilliant. Well, that's easily forgotten. But if you've done a video that somebody thought was funny, or you've took some people out and they've had a really great day, that's things that stay. Be an inspiration to companies or other drivers. Try to be, the best as you can be under whatever circumstances.
Yep.
Again, although it's hard because you've remortgaged your house and maxed your credit cards out and sold your cat so you can go drifting. If you get beat, if your qualifying score isn't what you expect, just shrug it off and just have a chat about it and feel the emotion, and maybe be honest about the emotion, but don't be too upset, because that shows. Try to be a positive light for drifting for everybody. Again, keep drifting fun.
Yeah.
And if keeping drifting fun for you is a cheap car and cheap tyres, then you should. And if you get mullered at every round, but you've hung out with your mates, you've eaten some pizzas which you had at Teesside which were fantastic, and you've watched a bit of drifting, you've had a cool time, that's better than bankrupting yourself to do badly and be sad about your life. It's...
So tyres been this huge thing now. There's all this pressure on us, I think, as a series to make changes, to develop, to make it fairer for drivers and to do it. It also provides an excellent opportunity for a major manufacturer to be involved with the series,
which is brilliant.
Yeah, it could be hugely positive, and it puts more onto drivers to develop the cars in other ways, like suspension geometry, mechanical grip, that sort of thing. So there's a huge potential benefit for it there. So something that we as a championship are seriously looking into an option for next year. And
I think you've got to. I think as the Premier Drift Championship, Drift Pro have shown a level of professionalism. They've got the best tracks, and I've competed in that this year.
Yeah.
And I used 4 tyres at Brands Hatch. Now the track was obviously better, and we didn't get as much seat time. That said, that blew my mind. For that level of, we the cars looked cool. We were on track. We made some smoke. Yeah, we had less grip, but it wasn't unbearably less grip. The cars were obviously a little bit easier to drive at that.
It's very different there as well, isn't it? With the speeds and the
108 mile an hour entries, and we're still on the hard compound. So people saying, well, I need it, we're going fast. Well, you don't. It's nice, you run an R1s. I drove Hayden's car at Driftland. I did 2.5 laps. I used 18 litres of fuel, and I used 2 Velinos. So probably £300 for 2.5 laps. If you put that into that cold hard fact, it'd make an onion cry. It's just ridiculous. That is not acceptable. And with the R1, well, it's the Velinos, but so much side bite, so much grip. It was like I could throw it in backwards, catch it. The car is so fast, but it's just burning the tyres, because the power I need to spin them is just killing the tyres in 2 laps. But I just want more people to carry on drifting. I want the people that have, cared or loved for years to stay in drifting because they can afford to. I don't want to see posts where people say, I can't afford to do it anymore. And that's where it's going. So for selfish reasons, I'd like the sport to continue in a way that's manageable for the drivers that I know and are in it. But moving forward, I want people to come into it and want to be here to stay in it and want to be here to improve themselves. Again, cheaper car, cheaper tyres. Don't think you need the best car. I don't care what the internet says. I don't care what somebody's got. You don't need it. You need to be a better driver. You need to have seat time. And it's,
And it shows for the people who do those things as well.
Yeah.
So that's where we see results. And with that, I think that's a nice point to end on for this. Thanks for stopping by, Carl. Check everything else out for BDC on social media. Check out Dango on Instagram and YouTube and all those other good places.
Message me if you want to know anything. I am always around.
There we go. And we'll see you all soon.